Welcome to the Milsurf Mike channel. As the vz.50-70 video, this covers another Czechoslovak surplus pistol that can be obtained for relatively cheap, the vz.52. This pistol had the potential to be a very good 9mm military pistol on par with peers such as the French model 1950 and superior to the Walther P38 P1 pistols. But Soviet pressure to have common caliber, as well as other changes, really took a good early concept by the Kratochvil brothers backwards. I'll also finish out their story, as well as go over how production of this pistol was used by Czechoslovak government to make the West think that their army was over 3 times larger than it actually was, so be sure you stay tuned for that. The developmental process for a new army pistol to replace the .380 ACP vz.24 and vz.38 was began in 1947 by Jan and Jaroslav Kratochvil, whose story I began in the vz.50-70 video. Since this was before the communist takeover, it was envisioned as a double-action, single-action 9mm parabellum pistol on par with the P38 Walther. Copying a Walther isn't hard to imagine, as the police pistols were, quote, inspired by the Walther PP-PPK. The locking mechanism would be patented by the brothers in 1949, and most of the other features would be taken from the vz.50. It is here where unification standards of the Soviet Union took a good pistol backward, especially when compared to the vz.50. First of all, the 9mm chambering would be tossed out in favor of 7.62 by 25 Tokarev. Double action was out, as the pistol would be made single action only, likely to give it similar handling to the TT pistols. Also, in an odd choice for a modern military pistol, the magazine latch was moved to the heel from the proper placement that was on the prototypes and the police pistols. It was said this was done to prevent accidental magazine release, but in reality was likely done for manufacturing simplification. The pistol will be one of 3 firearms by the Kratochvil brothers adopted as a vz.52 in 1952. Alright, let's take a little closer look at the Kratochvil brothers vz.52. At first glance, it looks like a beefed up version of their vz.50, but on the inside there are some differences. Because this is only 32 ACP, it is just simple blowback, where this is lock breech, recoil operating with roller blocks cammed to the slide, and we will see that when we take it down. This is 8.3 inches long by 5.6 inches tall with a 4.7 inch barrel, and it weighs 2.14 pounds when it's unloaded. The manual safety is also a decocker, but because of its position, as you can see here, it actually works in reverse from the vz.50. So if somebody in the Czech military or Czech government were going back and forth between the two, they needed to be aware of that. There is no external slide hold open catch to prevent the slide from closing on an empty mag. I'm not sure I'd call that a feature. And the trigger guard is out to help fire with gloved hands. So let's go ahead and take this pistol down. We're going to take the magazine out, and as you can see, it is heel release, as opposed to the vz.50 where the magazine releases where God intended. But we're going to pull that out, and this was actually a request by the Soviets. The Kratochvil brothers originally had the magazine release in the proper place. We're going to check and make sure she's unloaded before we take her down. So this is unloaded. So let's go ahead and take her down. We got to pull, see this little knob, this little notch right there? You got to pull that down. You just pull your slide forward a little bit and pull straight off. So that comes straight off like that. And here we can see our rollers that are cammed into the slide. And to get this out, this is a pretty strong spring, so we're going to use the heel on our magazine to help us out a little bit. There's a little notch right there that will stick the magazine in, pull it forward, and we are field stripped for cleaning purposes. Now, as I do on the last couple videos, it's Czech pistols, I'm going to go ahead and take the grips off just to show you some of the similarities with the vz.50. So the grips are only held on by this little clip right here, which has a tendency to fly. I don't know how well that would work for the long term instead of a screw. It seems kind of janky to me, but I guess it worked for them for a few decades. Let's go ahead and take this off, and some of the pistol was lifted directly from the vz.50, as we can see here on the grip here. So you got that cut out right there. You got that cut out right there. You notice on the vz.50 the grips help with the structure here, whereas you do actually have a metal back plate there, kind of like on the Walther PPK. So, anyway, let's go ahead and put this back together. To get the grips back on, you have a little knob right there. It goes into that little notch. So once those are fit down, you just got to kind of find it and snap it together, which I'm kind of doing blind here for the moment. So we got that on. Let's go ahead and get our other grip on here. So that just goes on quite simply right there. And this thing can only go on one way, so hopefully we get her on right the first time. If not, it'll be a learning experience here, which I did not put that on right the first way. So let's go ahead and... So our grip's back on, and we're ready to put it back together after we magically cleaned it. Now, one piece of information you need to have in your brain here is, see these rollers? This actually comes forward, and those rollers go inside. So that's a good piece of information to have on your brain when you put this back together. Let's go ahead and put our spring back on the barrel. And just set it in there for the time being, because we're going to need the heel of our magazine to help us out again. Pull that forward, let it push back, and our slide is back together. And all we got to do is put our slide back on the frame. You have these little notches here that meet up with these little cutouts here. So we just kind of loosely set her on top there. Pull that down. Function check. And we are back together. So let's continue with some more history. If you've learned something so far, please drop a like below. Production would begin at the Strakonics factory in 1952 and produced through 1954, with a few stragglers being put together in 1955. The demand for these pistols so quickly are possibly a reason for some of the production simplifications. This order would force the initial run of the vz.52 pistols to end. It would end weapons production at Strakonics, as it was ordered the factory to make civilian products only. The factory would start production of motorcycles and later on car parts. The pistols themselves would be dated, which is a good thing for finding out when they were made, as performing this task by going by serial number would be impossible. The reason for the random serial blocks is actually intentional. Although each letter block would have 10,000 pistols, the letters would not be consecutive, with some random double letter blocks thrown in. This was to make it look like to the West that they produced up to 760,000 pistols if only a small sample size were captured, in an attempt to make it appear that the Czechoslovaks had an over 3 million man army, since pistols were really only given to officers, drivers, heavy weapons crews, etc. In reality, only 210,000 pistols were produced. After reorganization of the Czechoslovak armed forces in 1957, there was only 210,000 active duty troops, with 350,000 in reserve, making the 210 pistols a massive excess. By 1970, the pistols with the most wear would be sent in for rebuilding, with Brown estimating that 15% of all pistols produced would go through rebuilding. Even though officially replaced in 1983 by the vz.82 9mm Makarov, spare parts of the vz.52 would be produced until 1992, and rebuilding would take place well into the Czech Republic years. The vz.52 pistols would start to be surplus in 1992. While there was an attempt in 1967 to sell a 9mm conversion in Europe, this did not fare well, and the 9mm vz.52 pistols you come across were either converted by Srovica Bruno, ZB, in the 1990s to make it easier for sales in the U.S., or by importers such as Century Arms. Two things about these conversions. First of all, they don't always produce satisfactory results, and second, the converted pistols aren't awarded CNR status, while those in original chambering are. So what are the Kratochvil brothers? One would figure with three of their firearms gaining military adoption in the same year, and Jan receiving very high awards, that they would have a long, continued career in firearms. Ending firearms production in Strakonics would also see the end of the Kratochvil brothers designing firearms. Armorers displaced by this decision were strongly encouraged and enticed to move to Brno with the promise of a beautiful 3-bedroom apartments with great living conditions. This did nothing for Jan, as he had a newly built house near the Strakonics hospital with a blossoming fruit garden. He would change fields and stay on to Strakonics as they became a motorcycle factory, rising to become the technical deputy of the company before his retirement in 1972. He would continue to work on projects for the company after his retirement. He would die in 2002 at the age of 90, being buried just 7 graves over from his much earlier deceased brother, Jaroslav, who also stayed on his Strakonets, but arrived at the decision via a different path. Jaroslav and his wife actually wanted to go to Brno, especially after being shown the nice apartment. They, along with their 2 children, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment where coal had to be brought up from the basement to heat the place, and Jaroslav had to ride the train to work. His children didn't want to move, though, and it was also around this time that both his father and father-in-law died, and there were things to be done on top of the funerals. CZ also asked him not to go and promised him a similar apartment to what he was promised in Brno, but he ended up giving that to a colleague who had 3 children and a longer commute. As I mentioned in the VZ50 video, Jan was politically active and chased a career, while Jaroslav would work and constantly bring his work home. He would get promoted at the factory, but as his daughter would later say, her mother would be frustrated at him for what he's seen as getting taken advantage of too much. Jaroslav would retire in 1971, only to die a year later at the age of 57 due to putting off a surgery on his gallbladder. While this pistol feels better in the hand than a TT pistol, when it comes to shooting it, I'm far more accurate with the TT. Although there are differences, when holding them, the vz.52 just feels like a beefed up vz.50, so it surprises me that there's a difference in accuracy for me. Part of it is I do have a problem acquiring the sight, and even when I do, I have a tendency to shoot low. I do seem to do better with modern ammo than surplus. In all, even with the cartridge considerations aside, I can see why the Czechoslovaks would look to replace this pistol within a couple decades, as it doesn't fare well against its peers, or even against the Kratochvil's police pistol, which if you want to learn more about, as well as the beginning of their story, click down here. Please join the GOA and get a discount with the code in the description. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.